In this video, we're going to talk about a common question that I get. Why don't pole barn trusses usually come from the factory with overhangs built in? I'm Chad Johnson. I'm with Truss Components of Washington. I've been in the truss industry for over 35 years, and I'm excited to talk to you about this topic today. Let's start off with what is an overhang. So your truss is a structural set of components engineered to carry the loads of snow and roofing and all that business, and typically bears on a wall and transfer those loads to the wall. Well, the overhang is the part of the truss that extends beyond that wall and a lot of times has a gutter on it, but that's to get the water away from your building or to keep sunshine off the side of your building. Serves a couple of different purposes. Well, in most residential type construction, that overhang is built into the truss. But when we do a pole barn or post frame building, it's usually not. Why is that? So let's talk for just a minute about what is a post frame building or a pole barn versus what is conventional framing. So a pole barn is a building that has posts at even increments. They might be 8 feet apart, 10 feet apart, 12 feet apart, but then those posts have a truss on each side of them. At the ends, usually just one on the outside, and then they have purlins that go over the top of them, and those purlins are what the roofing or the roof sheathing goes onto. So that's post frame. With conventional framing, instead of posts, you have exterior bearing walls, and then usually you have trusses every 24 inches, and the roofing goes right on top, or the roof sheathing goes right on top of those trusses. So with a post frame building, we've got those purlins to deal with. So from a side view, if we look at a truss on each side of that post, there are usually purlins that go over the top of the truss. So those purlins are every 2 feet, looking from the side of the truss. Those purlins are stacked on top like this. Well, that is just fine, but if we extend an overhang out on that truss and it's part of the truss that comes out from the factory, then we end up with a situation where we've got purlins on top of that, and when we get to the end of the building, we would have a very deep fascia. So typical pole barn construction is a 2x6 top chord and then 2x6 purlins, and so that fascia would end up being potentially 12 inches deep in order to cover that up. So the solution for that is that we do not install the overhang on the truss in the factory. Instead, it's installed in the field. And so our truss will come out top and bottom ending at that post. And then the purlins will be installed on top of the truss in the field. And then a separate piece, and I just call it the overhang, but some slang for it is a stinger. Anyway, that gets installed on top of the truss. It'll get gusseted to the truss in order to keep it in place, and then that keeps it in line with the purlins, and that gives us a reasonable fascia depth on the outside of the building. So if we have a 2x6 purlins and 2x6 top chord, for instance, then we can use a 5/4x6 or 5/4x8 fascia out there, as opposed to that deep 12-inch fascia like we were talking about. So the reason we don't typically include overhangs on pole barn trusses is because we want to keep that fascia at a reasonable height. I will share one instance where it might make sense to put the overhang on the pole barn truss in the factory, and that is in the instance where the purlins are going to be hung in between the trusses. So this is not standard practice here in the Northwest, but there are times when instead of stacking those purlins on top, they will put them in between the trusses, and that means the use of hangers in order to hold them in place. But that would be the one instance where it does make sense to build an overhang into the truss, because those purlins would be at the same depth and we don't end up with an oversized fascia out there. So anyhow, depending on the engineer's preferences for how the building is built and the builder that you're working with, you may end up hanging your purlins. If you let your manufacturer know that you're going to be hanging your purlins, then it would make sense to include the overhang on the truss from the factory. Otherwise, we'll leave the overhangs off, you'll install them in the field, and that'll be the best way to do it.